Do you know someone who lives in a foreign country? Or someone foreign who lives in yours? A friend, a neighbor, someone in your family. Migration is everywhere, and yet it still feels like something distant, something political, something that only affects others. But here's the real question. If migration has always existed, why does it feel like a crisis today? Your aha moment about migration. Here's some context. Migration is the human story. Long before borders, passports, or visas, there was movement. The first Homo sapiens appeared in Africa 300 years ago, and tens of thousands of years later, small groups began to live. Not because they wanted to explore the world, but because they needed to survive. They were looking for food. They were escaping climate change. They were searching for better conditions to live. And that simple decision to move is the reason why today we exist in every continent. Migration is not new. Migration is human. And as civilizations emerged, migration evolved with them. In the Roman Empire, people moved across the Mediterranean as soldiers, merchants, and enslaved people. Cities became cultural mixtures. In the Middle Ages, entire populations, Visigoths, Vikings, Huns, moved because of war, pressure, and the search for land. Then came one of the biggest turning points in history, the arrivals of Europeans in America. Millions migrated. Millions were forcibly taken as slaves. An irreversible transformation of continents, economies, and power. Migration was no longer just a movement. It became the engine of the global system. The present. What migration really is. Today the world is more interconnected than ever. We can travel faster, communicate instantly, see how other people live in real time. So migration is no longer invisible. At its simplest level, migration means changing the place where a person lives. But in reality, it reshapes economies, demographics, cultures, politics, identities. Some people move within their own country, others cross borders. Some move for a few years, others forever. Some choose to move, others are forced by conflict or natural disasters. And behind every migration story, there is always the same mechanism. Push factors, unemployment, low salaries, violence, political instability, and pull factor, opportunity, education, safety, stability, a better life. Migration is a decision, but it is never a free decision. It is a decision made within a structure. The first conflict, the visible and the invisible. On paper, the process looks simple. You decide, you prepare, you move, you adapt. But this is the part nobody talks about. Migration is not only a geographical movement, it is a psychological transformation. In many cases, it is a grieving process. Because when you migrate, you don't only gain a new country, you lose something. You lose your natural language environment, you lose your professional identity. Suddenly, your experience is not recognized. You lose your support network. You lose the version of yourself that existed in your place of origin. Many immigrants romanticize the destination, but when they arrive, reality begins. You start from zero. You feel invisible. You struggle to belong. You live between two worlds, not fully from here, but not fully from there. That is not failure, that is migration. And understanding this changes the entire conversation, because migration is not just about numbers, it is about human adaptation. The escalation, the global system. For countries of origin, migration can reduce unemployment and generate remittances that sustain millions of families. But it can also create brain drain. When people like doctors, engineers, or scientists leave, innovation slows down and public services become weaker. For receiving countries, migration brings labor, cultural diversity, and trained workers whose education was paid somewhere else. That means more productivity, more consumption, more taxes, more innovation. And here is the paradox. Many developed countries actually need migration because their populations are aging. Fewer young workers paying taxes, more elderly people needing pensions and healthcare. Without migration, the system starts to break. Forced migration adds another layer. In the short term, it requires public spending, housing, education, healthcare. But in the long term, everything depends on integration. If people are allowed to work, learn the language, and participate, they contribute. If they are excluded, social tensions appear. So the real issue is not migration. The real issue is how we manage integration. Then we reach one of the most controversial realities: irregular migration. People who enter without authorization or overstayed with their visas, and yet they work. Because there are entire sectors in developed economies that depend on jobs that local population no longer want to do. Agriculture, construction, cleaning, domestic work, restaurants, they contribute to the economy, but they also create pressure on local services. The impact is complex, mixed, different in every country. Irregular migration is not only a legal issue, it is economic, human, political, and moral. The uncomfortable truth. And all of this leads to a deeper question. Why are some countries rich and others poor? Is it culture? Is it effort? A big part of the answer is historical. Colonization extracted resources from some regions and accumulated wealth in others. Industrialization allowed certain countries to grow faster and set the rules of the global economy. Over time, strong institutions made an enormous difference. Rule of law, legal certainty, education, stable tax systems. But there is something even deeper, something no one chooses: the lottery of birth. Some people are born into stability, others are not. That is not a personal merit, that is a structure. And this creates the most powerful illusion of all. If I made it, anyone can. But not everyone starts from the same point. Migration does not create global inequality. Global inequality drives migration. Why the conflict exists? So why does migration generate fear? In times of economic crisis, people look for visible explanations. The immigrant is visible, new, different, and becomes the scapegoat. Not always because of hate, often because of fear. Fear of losing status, fear of losing control, fear of change. And this is where propaganda enters. It already existed in the Roman Empire, when others were called barbarians to justify expansion. Today, it comes from political parties, media, influencers, and algorithms. Social media amplifies emotional content. Fear spreads faster than facts, because propaganda doesn't appeal to logic. It appeals to fear, belonging, and status. And when people feel economically insecure, they are more vulnerable to these messages. The human perspective. So in the end, there is no us and them. There are only human beings trying to find a place to live with dignity. Migration is not just about changing countries. It is about rebuilding identity, starting again, adapting, belonging. Understanding migration does not require you to agree on everything. It only requires one thing: empathy. Because migration is not about borders, it is about people, and it always has been.